Hi, my name is Hans Erickson, and I'd like to welcome you to my Capstone project for my Master's of Science degree in Digital Cultural Preservation, where I virtually created the Museo de Antigua Guatemala. With the erosion of time, wars, and neglect, much of our cultural heritage has been lost. This is evident as an example with the recent wars in the Middle East where many cultural artifacts, monuments, and architecture have been destroyed. The destruction of our cultural heritage is not only an obliteration of materials, but is also an annihilation of our history. It is hard to know where we are historically without the knowledge of where we were in the past. For that reason, I decided to leverage my skills in look development, the application of photorealism textures and materials and animation to pursue an MSIS degree in digital cultural preservation. My capstone project was to create an exhibition of Mesoamerican cultural and historical artifacts in virtual space in a manner that they could be observed and studied worldwide. For this project, I determined the following parameters were crucial. First of all, I had to have access and availability of Mesoamerican historical cultural artifacts. Economy also played a part, and costs had to be within my budget. Also, the portability of equipment for transportation and ease of setup and takedown were also a very prime factor. Access to artifacts was solved when I was fortunate enough to be invited to an exhibition showing in Antigua, Guatemala, which displayed and curated over 200 artifacts from the Maya and Aztec cultures. I was given full access to study and scan these artifacts so that they could be accurately reproduced and displayed in 3D space. During the last 2 weeks of February 2020, I traveled to Antigua, Guatemala to scan the artifacts that were on display at this museum exhibit, which was co-sponsored with the Ministry of Culture of Spain, the Ruta Maya Foundation, and Missouri State University. This exhibit, Images of the Maya Gods in the 16th Century, The Encounter of Two Worlds, was on display from July 16, 2019 to March 1st, 2020, and featured over 200 Mesoamerican artifacts. Also, we had well over 100,000 visitors to that event. While at the showing in Antigua, I took many photographs of the facilities as well as the artifacts on display. I took care to measure each artifact and record each one in Excel spreadsheet to record their numerical object identification tags, brief description, heights, widths, and photographic image numbers. I also took photos of the displays and how they were arranged so that when creating the digital museum, I could replicate both the facilities, displays, and artifacts as accurately as possible. Photogrammetry is the process of taking a series of photographs around an object in a 360-degree pattern at various levels and distances. The bottom of the object can generally be captured by turning the object on its side. This is a representation of actual camera locations that were used on an artifact. As shown, it is best to take over 100 photos that lap over each other by 25 to 30%. Shadows should also be kept at a minimum. The process mesh, or 3D object, is generally produced as a high resolution mesh of generally 80,000 to 180,000 facets per artifact. For purposes of using this mesh in a game engine, for virtual reality or first-person shooter, those face counts were much too high. It was necessary to reduce the face count but preserve the detail as much as possible. This was achieved through a 3D software application. What we're looking at right now is a render of an object that has been greatly reduced in face count and has lost a little bit of detail. However, by leveraging Substance Painter, which was then employed to complete the texture maps to produce a final high quality mesh in 3D, the low resolution mesh and the diffuse color map were imported into Substance Painter, and additional texture maps were then baked out against the high resolution FBX file. The final texture map to be produced was the roughness map, which was produced using a sand filter, since most of the artifacts were clay ceramic based. And you can see from this particular render, almost all of the detail has been absolutely 100% restored. Once all the artifacts had been captured in as much detail concerning the facility where they were displayed was recorded, the process of putting it all into digital space was started. For this purpose, I leveraged Blender and Unreal Engine from Epic Games. I was given the architectural plans of the facilities, which with on-site measurements, and from which I was able to construct the main plaza and rooms where the event was held, again using photographic references as a guide for materials and textures. The reproduction of these facilities in 3D software, complete with materials and textures, were then exported from Blender as an FBX file and then imported in an Unreal Engine as virtual reality. Display cases were then modeled, as well as all the artifacts that were scanned. Everything was then exported out as an FBX file and imported into Unreal Engine. The design of the experience was determined to be less like a game, but rather what it would be like to visit a museum. The displays were arranged much like they were as the showcase in Antigua. The visitor in virtual reality can teleport to every display, pick up and examine every artifact. Menus were provided at each display with a likeness of that artifact. When these menu squares were selected, the viewer will then be teleported to a wall-sized monitor where they can view a video of the artifact, complete with a voiceover description of the item and subtitles for the hearing impaired. The entire experience can be completed in a standing or seated position. The eventual goal of this project is to make it as accessible to the public as possible. Although virtual reality is becoming increasingly popular and affordable, it is not accessible everywhere. In the future, this experience will be ported over to a first-person shooter format, which can then be experienced on a PC, tablet, or even on a Raspberry Pi. This format, although not as immersive, would make it available to third world areas where internet and technology are not abundant. Also, the language used is entirely in English, which defeats the purpose of a widespread use. Voiceovers and subtitles will then be made to include Spanish as well as English, so that this experience could then be disseminated to towns and villages in Latin America where access to historical culture is compromised. There remains physical detail that is missing from the recreation of the facilities that hosted the show, and it is my hopes that additional work will attend to that. The concept of preserving our historical culture in digital form is of no way the best solution. However, the ravages of time will eventually erode the physical forms we now possess. Additionally, the availability for students and the general public to study these cultural items are not always possible. Even the native countries where these cultural items originated, much of the native population has not had access to them. It is the fervent wish that projects like this will make the availability and access to heritage that would otherwise be lost. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and fire up the virtual experience and take you on a short tour. Okay, we are presently in the VR experience, and presently we are sitting in the Ministry of Culture of Spain in Antigua, Guatemala. And as soon as I turn around here, let me start this, you'll see that I'm greeted with a uh, menu where I can learn about whatever I'm using, whether I'm using HTC Vive or if I'm using a Valve Index. These give all the controls that I can use. I am presently using the Oculus 2, and there's the menu of selections that I can have so that I can teleport around and experience everything. When I want to visit the museum, I just have to click that little item there with my trigger finger, and it teleports me into the museum. Once I'm in the museum, I can travel around, I can rotate to my left and to my right, and I can also teleport to various displays. And these are pretty accurate displays of what was in the experience. And if I want to learn anything about it, I just have to click that and I go to a screen where it begins to tell me about it. And then I can return back to the museum where I started from, and I can teleport to look at other objects. We're presently teleporting over to look at one of my favorite ones. This is the very first one that I worked on, and now if I come over here, there is a voiceover that talks about it, and it's also uh, has it also has words that for the hearing impaired that they can understand and read. This is another object that I really enjoyed using photogrammetry on, and you can see that it came out quite nicely. It's an exact replica of this particular artifact. As you can see, there's two rooms in here. And when I pick up these items and I take a look at them, and I can also teleport over and learn more about that object. And if I want to quit the game or return to the museum, all I got to do is quit the game, and then the experience is over.